everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast.
Slash recap thing.
Yes, this is Viewer's Choice Month. Hastily cobbled together in the case of this particular stream, having lots of technical difficulties. Tony is not on camera here, but you will be hearing his voice, hopefully, through the magic of internet stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a Comcast problem because my download speed is almost 250. My upload speed is like 2 to 3 megs.
So there is nothing you can do about that. We're very sorry. Today's movie, though, is The Vampire's Kiss,
which is possibly Nicolas Cage's best performance as an actor.
That's
most likely.
That's a tough. I mean, that's a high bar to set, Tony.
Let's be real here. He's not that great of an actor, so he did awesome in this. Like, Adaptation was fine, Lord of War was fine, but for the most part, he's just him. Like, he's kind of just selling himself. Like, you're getting the Nicolas Cage. It's like Christopher Walken or anything like that. You're not really getting a great actor. You're just getting somebody who is themselves.
I don't think that's always true. I think Nicolas Cage comes into this movie, and here's my interpretation of this. Nicolas Cage comes into this movie, which is a terrible movie, and turns it into a terrible Nicolas Cage movie. All right, he
made it watchable for me, at least.
He made it interesting. I can't think of another actor who would come into a movie like this and say, okay, you got this movie about a douchebag who thinks he's turning into a vampire, so that's what the movie's about, and change it as much as he did and go as bonkers he did. I guarantee you, I don't know this for a fact, but like in my mind, there is no way that the director said to Nicolas Cage, Nick, you're eating a cockroach on screen, okay? You're eating an actual cockroach. Tony's a little bit low. We're going to turn him up just a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. It's usually artifact of whatchamacallit on the I usually have the game a little bit lower, so was not anticipating being also the main camera. But Nicolas Cage eats a cockroach in this movie, and I think that's 100% a Nick Cage decision. Like, he hated every second of it. I read interviews where he's like, everything in me wanted to not do this, but he chose that. I 100% believe Nick Cage chose to eat a cockroach because he thought that needed to be in this movie.
It's like he was that bored with it that he just decided he was going to shove a cockroach in his mouth.
And I do not agree that Nicolas Cage is not a good actor. And one of the things that I think is proof of that is the fact that he chooses to do this ridiculous over-the-top accent, but he does it in such a way that you can tell it's a put-on for the character.
Yeah, like that he's just this foppish guy from New York that wants to be like high class, but he doesn't really know how to be.
Well, yeah, he does this. I couldn't tell what kind of accent it was. At first, I thought it was like an English accent, but maybe it was
just a bad British accent.
But he lets it down when he's like with people who are kind of more on his level. So a lot of the movie, he's talking down to people, and he's talking down to them like this. You understand how difficult it is to keep these clients? I forget what the lady's name who he's always talking down to in the movie, but whatever she is.
Elba, I think.
Alva. Have you gotten these? But then when he's with his psychiatrist, he kind of lets it up just a little bit, and it's not quite as pronounced. And
then when he's ranting and screaming, there's none of it at all.
Oh man, the ranting and screaming. That's the best. The ranting and screaming is the best parts of this movie. The first half of this movie is Nick Cage just being a dick to people.
Yeah, he's straight up just a bad person.
And that is, for me, was the giant fundamental flaws. I did not care what happened to him once I'd gotten through like 45 minutes of him berating people and treating them like garbage and just like serial, like sleeping around with everybody he could get. I mean, granted, there's not really that many women, but you can tell from how his character is that there are a lot of women in his life that he just has no interest in. He just wants to have sex with. All of that is pretty like off-putting. And then when he turns into a vampire, like the only thing that's interesting about it is just that now he's off-putting and also completely nuts.
Yeah, he's just full on unhinged.
And you don't want him not to turn into a vampire. You're sort of just like, okay, let's just see where this goes. You want him to fail in the most miserable way possible. And the movie doesn't give him enough failure, honestly. I saw some people talking about this as like a parable for the pressures of modern life and how it just drives you crazy, but
I figured that was it.
He is not under pressure. The movie never shows him being under pressure. He is the pressure. The pressure exists because of him.
Yeah, he's got a cushy job that makes a lot of money. The only thing that he's kind of pressured himself into is trying to find like a long-term like relationship.
He doesn't understand what that means.
Yeah, he doesn't at all.
It's so...
Like, he's got an assistant to do all of the work that's hard. Like, what is he actually doing other than having conversations with his clients? It's kind of like this movie reminded me a lot of American Psycho. Yeah, but it was basically an incompetent version of Patrick Bateman.
I was trying to figure out why I was more okay with Patrick Bateman in American Psycho than I was with this guy. And I guess maybe it's because Patrick Bateman is at least in touch with the fact that he's nuts and he wants to kill people.
Yeah, that's like the opening monologue is him basically explaining that he's not like a normal human. It's all just a facade.
Yeah, whereas Nicolas Cage is becoming this... Maybe he does definitely kill somebody at one point, and rapes somebody. Does Patrick Bateman never rapes anybody? I don't know why that makes it better. Like, at least the rape victim gets to live on, but
he sexually abused people, but he didn't.
Oh, did he? It's been a while since I saw American Psycho. Yeah,
with the prostitutes, he got way too rough with them, rougher than they wanted.
Okay, right. You're right, and that was bad also. It was so hard to watch this. It was only an hour and 40 minutes. This is a short-ish movie. We're not talking about like a 2.5-hour slog, but man, did it feel like a 2.5-hour slog.
I went into this expecting Al to be like, man, I could not believe that I hadn't heard of this before. It was so good. Like, I would have put money on that because this just seems so much like your type of movie. Where it's like somewhat original, it's different, like it's got some interesting elements of social commentary, and then it's also just like so poorly executed that none of those matter.
Here's how I would, if you're thinking about experiencing this movie and you haven't seen it, I would say go and look on YouTube. There's several compilations of like best scenes from this movie, and just watch the parts with Nicolas Cage being crazy.
Yeah.
Because those... taking out of context, I think, would be entertaining. But in the context of the film, they're really just, like, it's just what he deserves and, like, not even enough. It did not have any sharks in it, Griffin.
Yes.
That's correct. That was the problem. No sharks.
And the thing is, this movie generated at least half of the Nicolas Cage memes where he's just looking completely crazy and saying weird stuff. Like, at least half of them come from this. The rest are like Con Air, where it's like, put the bonnet down. But, I don't know. It's a bizarre movie.
It was disappointing to me because I went into this...
We already talked about that, Joe. The movie was about Nicolas Cage thinking he was turning into a vampire, but he was really just losing his mind.
Yeah, I would say we might not have said that as succinctly as that, but yes, the plot is that he gets bitten by this woman who may or may not be real. He also cuts himself.
I didn't think she was real.
Shaving at one point. He fights off a bat in one of the first scenes of the film that has made it into his apartment, which again may or may not be real. It says to his psychiatrist that like the bat thing, like he remembers everything else, but this other thing like might not have been real. He's willing to admit it at that point, and he got like this massive boner fighting off this bat. We don't get to see that, unfortunately. At least, well, maybe I wasn't looking for it at the time.
I didn't look to I didn't rewind to see if he like just had a huge erection fighting a bat.
It seems like they should have shown that. If like as bonkers as this movie gets, and as it's billed as a comedy of some kind, and I didn't laugh that often, so I could have used a few more boners. But
I laughed a couple times. It was like you are a lot quicker to dislike a character for being a bad person, and if it's a fun ride, I don't care if they're a bad person. So I think I was able to enjoy this at least like 20-30% more than you were.
He gets maybe bits, and just like throughout the movie just becomes more and more crazed as he thinks he's turning into a vampire. I think one of the big flaws for me about the movie is that we don't see a seed planted for why he would have this delusion. Like, what is it about this character that would make him prone to think he's turning into a vampire? Where does that come from?
Yeah, like you could have had like familial pressure or something like that, like his dad being a hard ass to him. You could have had any number of things that would have just given a little more reason as to why he's cracking under the pressure, other than, well, it fits the story.
Well, and just the specific thing of turning into a vampire, like where is that seed planted? Why what's his fascination with vampires all of a sudden? Why does he think that that's what's happening to him? I mean, I get in real life we can just say, well, popular culture has vampires and people can fixate on things, but we don't see him fixating on any vampire stuff.
Joe, do you have bats in New York?
They have bats everywhere, Tony. I think.
They're dying off in a lot of places, like the American brown bat is going extinct because of a parasite.
I will tell you, one of the things I enjoyed about this film a lot was the sort of the atmosphere, the background of what is happening around. There was a lot of interesting set dressing with the apartments that the apartment that he lives in. The outside door, for instance, there's just this random like placard that's for a silver jeweler company, but it's in German. So I had to Google this. I forget what the words were, but I Googled like this thing because it kept showing up, and I thought maybe this has something to do with it. And it's this. It says silver jewelry, and then there's a guy's name. I assume a maker of silver jewelry. I was able to find an Etsy page with the same guy's name that had silver jewelry like being made. I couldn't tell if that was an homage to this or if they were actually selling the same person's jewelry from the movie.
My bet,
it was real.
My bet is that guy's probably dead by now if he's old enough to have a placard in New York, and that this is just an Etsy store for some guy who really likes this movie.
It could be. But I thought that was interesting that they put that like in a different language, right? Talking about silver, which is one of the vampire's prime weaknesses, just sort of like outside his door. There's a lot of cool atmosphere to this movie. And the background characters are really diverse. Like it feels like, and this is a weird thing to pick up on maybe, but it seemed like there were a lot more like people of color as extras in the background, and also just in the plot in general than I would have expected from this movie.
Yeah, for what was this, 88?
Yeah.
Something like that. But that might also just be New York.
It might be. I mean, it feels very authentically New York, of what I would feel like New York would be. There's a lot of variation there, and I mean, even in the cast, right? Nicolas Cage is the only main character who's full on white. The girl that the
vampire, like,
she's half black. I looked it up because I thought she was Hispanic. I was like, there's something about her that's a little bit not Caucasian.
She was a redhead, so I just assumed white.
But yeah, her dad was black in real life. The actress's dad was black. The woman he's berating the whole time is Hispanic, and I don't know if the movie's really saying anything about that. It just was neat to sort of have a little bit of a different texture than sort of your standard everybody's a white character unless we're making some kind of statement about it, which it really wasn't. It was just sort of, you could argue that the Hispanic lady was maybe like an example of downtrodden Hispanic people under the boot of, the oppressive white man, but they weren't really making a point about that other than that Nick Cage is a dick, and he's a dick to this lady in particular.
Pretty much. Like, it didn't feel like they were trying to make a statement. It just felt natural. So I agree with you on that.
It felt like a job that she would really have, too. Like, that she probably needs this job. A lot of the tension in this movie of him pushing her to do this stuff, to find this file that he really, really needs is the kind of stuff that you would say, why would you keep doing this job? But it's possible that it's hard for her to find a job, that there's not like a ton of stuff out there, and she really needs this. She
might be getting paid more. Like, there's a lot of different things that could have been going on there. Like, it looked like the type of job where they would actually pay their secretaries well enough.
And when it got to being like, when it split off and went to her point of view, the movie became, I think, at least somewhat more compelling. Nicolas Cage is going crazy at this point. He's chasing her around, but you start off from his POV, and when you really dig into like what her life is like, with this guy who thinks he's turning into a vampire as her boss. That was like extra level horrifying. Like before, it's just sort of like, just get this guy out of my face. But like when you're in her shoes, you're like, like he comes to her house?
Yeah, that was the weirdest part, is like he's just like in the window with, I couldn't even tell what he brought her for being sick, and he just like drags her to work, and like everything seems like it's okay, that he's like apologizing for being a dickhead and all this, and then he just starts losing it in the cab. Like just starts calling her all sorts of names, starts screaming again. It's just like a bad situation all over a contract that doesn't mean anything, but his ego won't let him admit that it doesn't mean anything.
That's like half the plot too. The fact that, like, that he works as a literary agent, and as far as I can tell, the only thing that he has to do is find this contract from like 10 years ago for this guy who wants to frame it. That's the only work we see him doing. Everything else is just chumming around with people, talking about him assaulting this woman in the well, he doesn't assault her in the bathroom, but he sure does chase her into the ladies' room.
Scares the crap out of her. Yeah.
Yeah, just running, screaming down the hall. He does assault her in the basement. Like him screaming at her to shoot him with the gun that she has,
but it's filled with blanks, so she's trying to scare him.
And he thinks he's immortal because he's a vampire.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, if he did that with real blanks, he probably would have blown his brains out. Just like that surge of pressure in the mouth.
Yeah, like that will. Don't do that, guys. That's a bad
never
time.
Fire a blank like point blank on anything.
Unfortunately, we've had some news stories about people who have killed themselves playing Russian roulette with blanks, thinking that it was perfectly safe. It is not perfectly safe.
It's better than the girl I went to school with who tried to show her friends how Russian roulette worked with an automatic pistol. She was 13. She didn't know any better.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
Did she? Okay, it's worse. Did she actually like? Did it go real bad?
Oh yeah.
People died. Okay.
She was at my bus stop, and she wasn't.
That's not how guns work ever.
Well, she took the clip out, but didn't check the chamber.
Oh. That's still not how Russian roulette works. Like, you gotta have the thing to spin.
Yeah, it was weird at the school after that for a few days. Yeah, that's how the actor in The Crow did die. It was from blanks, but it was also because one of the cartridges got caught in the barrel, so the blank ended up firing basically a shell casing that was inside the barrel.
It was, that was Brandon Lee, I believe?
Yep. And like, whenever you're in a situation like that where the camera's sort of to the side, you're not even supposed to be aiming at the person anyway. Like, you're just firing guns at a guy. Like, you don't have to have it look like it's going directly at them, but he just happened to take that, like, that shot. It was either to the heart or the temple. I can't remember which.
That must have been... I'm thinking about that scene because I know that fact about blanks. And I knew when he put it in his mouth, I was like, well, how's this going to work out? And they actually do show the gun firing. And in 1980, whatever, that wasn't... There's no way to make that a CG effect. So they must have had the gun barrel plugged up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, too. Especially because so much of the firing was coming out of the back of the gun.
Right.
Like, it looked like it was coming out from where the hammer was, out of the chambers, like, all of that. Like, so it was kind of an interesting special effect, and I could see that if that was how blanks worked, being a good way to convince a crazy person that they're immortal. But it was just bizarre.
It was an interesting plot point, and the way everything played out eventually with the stake, like him carrying around his, like, that slat from a pallet, you know, asking people to stab him. He carried that piece of pallet for a long time. I will say, also, I want to mention that scene where he's carrying the pallet, he gets to that part where he's hallucinating talking to his psychiatrist. And that was maybe like the most interesting scene in the movie for me, from his perspective anyway, like when we're in his POV, and it keeps switching back from crazy person talking to a lamppost to his vision of him being put together in her office, and like she's talking to him, and sometimes it's just cutting from him talking to nothing to like the office scene, and then sometimes it's cutting to his vision of what he is in the office. All that was really neat, I thought. Yeah, and especially because in the office he's standing up way higher than her, kind of lording over her, telling her that her entire profession is bunk, and that she that she basically hasn't helped him at all and all this, and that he's ready to move on and
Then, like, as they have this conversation, she just magically brings in the perfect woman. Like, it was
he
so
could
strange.
not make it back to his apartment without learning to hate. That's the part that I thought was the best. He creates a woman out of his own head that is his perfect ideal mate, that shares all of his interests, and by the time they get back to his apartment, he's screaming at her about how much he hates her.
Yeah, it's like, oh, just leave, and like, the last thing he says in the psychiatrist's office was, "I know this one's gonna last a long time."
I can understand why this is a cult classic. I do understand what draws people to this movie. It felt interminable. And the weird thing is, I looked up some reviews of this movie, and when it came out, people were confused by it. Like, they felt like the plot was, like, they didn't understand what was going on. I didn't have that problem. It wasn't like I didn't get it. Some of the stuff wasn't real. Big whoop. It just wasn't a good story. It wasn't very funny either. Like, the thing was, like, it's supposed to be this black comedy, and Nick Cage brings this bizarre manic energy to the movie, but it's like, I don't know. I was just so bored and beaten down by the first half before the manic energy really gets going that by the time the manic energy started, I was just sort of like, what is this? I don't understand. What's going on?
It's also, like, I was trying to figure out if he actually killed that woman. I think he did.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was in the papers and everything the next day.
Him walking, again, if you isolate the pieces of this movie that are just Nick Cage being bonkers, like, him walking into the club with, like, his arms hunched up like Nosferatu, plastic fangs in his mouth because he couldn't afford the real ones.
I did love the plastic fangs. I did love that.
It's such a just surreal moment. It did not do well when it came out, Joe. It did poor. It did so badly. Although I will say the budget listed on this is $2 million, and they made like $750,000. So they
could have done worse.
Yeah, it was kind of the I don't guess the Blumhouse model is really what this is, but sort of. It didn't really exist back in the 80s. It was all a bunch of mid-level films.
Whenever I was actually doing some research on this, Blumhouse had a few articles on Vampire's Kiss.
Oh, like they have their sites. I've mentioned this in the past, and sounds like a shill thing to say. Nobody's paying me to say this, but their site is actually a pretty cool, like, resource for horror fans, where you can go and they write articles on, like, creepypastas and, like, horror movie trailers and sort of, like, weird phenomenon. I mean, they play it up because they're, looking for that readership. They'll act like it's more legit than it is, but it's a fun site if you're into that kind of subversive horror, paranormal type stuff. I recommend Blumhouse.com if you're a horror fan, because they got some good articles.
Yeah, I got a little bit of insight this weekend at the Telluride Film Festival whenever I was watching Creep, because that's another Blumhouse one.
Oh, is it?
Creep 2. And the director was talking about how Jason Blum thought that, like, the Creep series was going to be bigger than Paranormal Activity, and, like, he was banking all this, like, hope on it, but then it couldn't even find, like, distributors to theaters. It was such a weird flop for them, but it didn't cost them anything, so they didn't really lose anything.
What I saw of the movie, it seems like it's a found footage thing. It's mostly inside a guy's trailer and out in the woods, and I'm guessing there's probably some gore effects that they had to pay for, like, later in the film, but I mean, in the grand scheme of how much movies cost, that's not that much.
I think he said both of them were under 200,000, so I'm sure it probably made out, but I don't know if it's actually one that's going to ever hit, like, cult classic. It's not Paranormal Activity that made, what was it, like $200 million off of a $75,000 budget?
So Paranormal Activity was insane. I don't think it's definitely not going to do that, but I do think it has a cult following. A lot of people on the horror subreddit really dig that movie and were very excited for Creep 2, or maybe that's astroturfing. I can't tell sometimes, but it seemed like I was seeing a lot of excitement for Creep 2.
It's also getting a release on Netflix, so, like, I believe Netflix was the distributor that picked it up, so it's just going to be easily accessible. It's probably going to get viewed more than a lot of horror movies coming out this month because of that easy access.
I got to tell you, I don't know, I'm not a distributor, but I tried to watch Creep and I was too creeped out to continue. Like, just the level, not even like the horror or anything, just it's a movie that runs on almost like cringe for the first, 45 minutes? I don't know.
It gets even worse. It really does.
Like, he's at one point taking a bath and inviting this other dude to film him taking a bath and maybe get in with him, and things are gonna go even wronger. Like, it's a horror film, so somebody's got to get murdered at some point. But like, I couldn't get past that. I wanted the blood to start flowing. I didn't need to see like naked dude in a bathtub just sort of weirdly creeping somebody else out because of a want ad that he answered.
Well, Mark Duplass is kind of a weird guy. Like, he does the whole mumblecore thing where a lot of it is improvised. So they just they've got like a 15-page script and the rest of it is improvised. And the director was talking about how like Mark Duplass just turns into that guy for a while. And in the second one, like it's subverting it a little bit because it's a woman who's trying to get popular on YouTube, who's doing these like encounter shows where she just goes finds really weird people.
Right.
And like she gets into this and she can't, like, he's straight up admitting like, I kill people. Like, he just is outright with it. It's the kind of the opposite of the first one where like there's nothing subversive about it, but she doesn't fully believe it because like who would just come out and say that? And it builds up from there. So it's interesting to see like the differences between the two movies. But once again, it's not just the bathtub thing. He like says, I know there's a lot of tension right now, so I'm just going to get past this. And he just drops everything and he's naked in front of her. It's like, we just need to get past this. Yeah. We have to do this. And like, she's so desperate to get the YouTube video that she actually strips down. It's like, it's my turn. And like pulls the same thing on him.
I think
it's just weird.
I read a review that talked about that was a strength of the film, that in this film, she's not as off balance as the guy in the original film, that she's like taking control, sort of trying, like there's a power struggle where she's trying to take that control back from him. And I think that's an interesting new way to go. I honestly am so surprised that they made a sequel. Like, Creep seemed like the kind of movie that you just do a one-off of, and that's it. Like,
what happened is that Blumhouse bought it with the intention of making a trilogy. They were forced to make 3 movies.
Oh, like they had a contract where like, we're definitely doing 3, and
yeah,
okay.
So like they were kind of forced into the whole 3 thing, but. Like with it, you know how movie studios are. If the first 2 don't do well, they probably won't go for the 3rd.
Well, but I also know how Blumhouse is, and they're almost on the Asylum model where they don't lose money on a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've never lost money on a movie, but they haven't lost enough where it like hurts their bottom line.
Also, the director for this movie or for Creep is a giant. He was like 6'8".
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting.
See him
like
in person?
Yeah, he was at the film festival talking about all this stuff and taking questions from the crowd. I like walked up and shook his hand, and I felt like a child. I'm just like staring up at him.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about just in general about the Telluride Film Festival and what you saw and what you got to do there?
Oh, like it was a little bit abridged for me because I had stuff going on that Friday. I had some family stuff, like my niece's 2nd birthday, and my family made this big deal. So we had to go down to Colorado Springs, hang out there. We found they found the coolest hotel water park thing ever. It was just like a massive indoor water park with wave pool. But that, like, at the actual Telluride Film Festival, first off, you go into this little old mining town where every single house is like a perfectly restored Victorian house. Probably a population of maybe 2,000 people. And like, it's just this absolutely gorgeous town set in like a giant bowl of like just straight up rock. Like, it's some of the most intimidating rocks I've seen around a city because it's just straight up cliffs on all sides. And it's the end of the line. It's not like a lot of those cities where you can kind of pass through it. It's like that is just where the road ends. And like, it's one of the most adorable towns I've ever seen. And I get there and everybody's just so chill and happy. Like, you're just going to these different movies. They've got a ton of different options. They had that new, the only one I really missed, like, because it was too crowded, was Jungle, the new Daniel Radcliffe one.
I've heard good things about that.
Yeah, I really wanted to catch that one, but by the time I got there, they had actually filled up that screening. But otherwise, it was pretty easy to access some of the other ones. There's a French movie that I can't remember the name of right now that was really good, but it was more of a thriller than horror. Actually, a lot of these could have been considered thrillers over horror. But like the entire atmosphere of the town, like you can tell the town gets into it. They get the full October thing going on. In the ticket booth for the theaters, there's a skeleton like taking tickets, and it was just super easy, super chill. Like the concessions were cheap. It was like $3 for a large popcorn. They were serving beer, like, and everybody's just having a good time talking about it. And everybody's like, I didn't see many Halloween costumes, but there were a lot of people decked out in like Halloween themed stuff. I also really love the style of Telluride because they go like 50s comic style for all their production stuff. So like the manuals, the tickets, the posters they have around town. It's all that like 40s, 50s style comic stuff.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very sad that what other films did you get to see?
I've got a list here.
You said the French film. Now I know that there's a new Jason fan film that's on YouTube that debuted there. Correct? I know you didn't get to see that one because I asked you about it.
I didn't get to see that one. I ended up seeing 4 movies basically. Like usually when I go to a fest like this, I end up seeing like 8 movies. But I had an 8-hour drive in front of 8-hour drive in front of me on Sunday. So I like went to a movie and I was like, I'm done. I need to go. I'm not getting home at like 3 a.m. and then going into a normal work week. Like
rough stuff.
Yeah, like it's a lot further than any other film festival I've gone to. Well, I guess it was further to go to Silver Screen Fest, but I actually had a place to stay there. Like I slept in my car that night, so that got a little bit interesting too. Like I'm not made for back seats the size of my back seat. So like I just like kind of posted up, like sitting up entirely, and I had like 4 candles burning because it was 10 degrees outside, and I was hoping to warm the inside of my car without having to burn gas all night. So just like sitting there after watching Creep, which is a movie that has like an axe murderer in the woods while I'm parked in the woods, like in a freezing car that's 10 degrees, just completely frosted over. Yeah, with candles burning. And I'm like, I wonder why I can't sleep.
It's like the creepiest boudoir ever. It's like, come back to my car. You can sleep in the back seat and burn candles for warmth.
Yeah, and I had to go find a place that I knew I wouldn't get like bothered by cops for like being a hobo and sleeping in my car. So I had to go find a place that was in the woods. And I was like, I'm glad I brought a gun, but I don't think I'm going to need it, but I'm glad I brought it.
This part of the story is insane. Why didn't... It does sound dangerous, Rich. It's very...
I blew out the candles before I started sleeping, especially because my sleeping bag was getting dangerously close to them. Like, I just wanted to heat it up before I went to sleep, because when you're asleep, it doesn't matter if you're getting hypothermia. You'll just sleep better.
Well, you breathe in that cold air, though, you're going to get, like, a real bad sore throat.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad by the time I got the car, like, warmed up. When I woke up and there was frost, like, in my beard and everything, it was a little cold. I probably should have just paid the $100 to get a hotel room.
I would have probably tried to sleep, like, in the front seat, just sort of recline back.
Yeah, I did end up trying that for a little bit, but there's like this weird lumbar thing that just wasn't working for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was not a comfortable weekend. So basically the night before I was staying in that hotel, my dad snored all night, so I got like maybe 2.5 hours. Then I drove up 8 hours, got about 3 or 4 hours of sleep, went and watched more movies, and then drove home on that. Like my eyes were going cross-eyed while I was on I-70. So like there were a couple times where I just pulled over and drank another 2 Red Bulls. That morning getting back, I had 9 cups of coffee and 4 Red Bulls.
Whew.
So
like there was just like 1 extra Red Bull from what you're normally drinking.
It was about 2. Like the coffee content like is usually not there with the Red Bulls. Like usually I'm not doubling up on different types of coffee.
Oh, okay.
Or different types of energy drinks. I'd say that right now I'm drinking about like 1 energy drink and 2 Dr. Peppers a day, but it's getting cold enough that I'm going to switch to coffee.
I like coffee. I think coffee gets me through, and usually, like, not. I try to
it's so
limit
much
my
cheaper.
intake. And yeah, you can control like your flavors and stuff. I make it at home. I really enjoy.
Well, you've got like the French press style thing, right?
French press and a cold brew pitcher, which I have going right now. I forgot to set it in the fridge last night, but it will be ready by this evening. Or I could let it sit for the rest of the night and get a little bit even more potent.
Yeah.
So
get that nitro brew action.
It's good stuff. But you did not get to see Never Hike Alone. I did start watching it a little bit. I did not get very far into it. I was at my lunch break yesterday and set aside a little bit of time, but my wife didn't want to watch it, so we turned it off and watched Face Off instead.
The Nicolas Cage one? Shut up, phone.
No, the TV show.
There's a Face Off TV show?
Yeah, it's just makeup. It's about, like, on Sci-Fi, they do, like, makeup competitions where, like,
oh,
people into
yeah,
monsters.
I've seen stuff like that. I thought that you were saying that they turned Face Off, like, into a TV show like they've done for every other movie.
No, not yet. That would be a cool idea, though.
Just, like, cutting faces off and, like, John Travolta's there for no reason.
Well, John Travolta probably wouldn't be there, but you would just have, like, this, it would essentially be like Battlestar Galactica, where you can never be sure, like, who is a Cylon? You would have people show up and you'd be like, I know this person, but what if they're not them? Boom, boom, boom. I could see you could spin that out into at least a whole TV season.
Yeah, I think you probably could. I probably wouldn't watch it, but, like, I actually do enjoy that movie for how just bonkers it is.
Face Off, the TV show that actually does exist, though, has really made me appreciate when I see monster makeup in movies. There's been some interesting stuff on Sci-Fi recently that I've enjoyed. A couple of different Sci-Fi movies had creature effects in them that were like dudes in suits. One of them was Sandman, which I really enjoyed. It took like it took the sort of you're imagining a thing and it comes to life, right? There's that trope. This little girl has essentially magic powers and she's afraid of this Sandman entity she heard about as a kid, and so she manifests it out of her mind. But then it like goes off in a direction where all of a sudden you're dealing with like the SCP Foundation essentially, and they're trying to get this girl and turn her into a weapon.
Interesting.
And
they know she can manifest monsters, so that's why they're going after her.
Yeah, they want her to manifest, like they want to train her to manifest these monsters. She also is a little bit psychokinetic if she wants to be, but they're trying to get her to make these monsters come to life for them. They have other people that they've like kind of dealt with before that are a little bit powerful, but she's more powerful than they are. And the whole movie has this character, the Sandman, this thing that she manifests out of her mind, and it's a dude in a suit. They don't go for some CG thing. Like, they actually create this thing, live on camera, and it looks great. And they do the same thing for a movie that was not as good called Never Knock, which is essentially about a house where it's sort of like a Bloody Mary type myth where you're not supposed to look in the mirror or say Bloody Mary 3 times. They have this house where you're like, don't knock on the door. And these kids go and do, and they create this monster that makes your fears real, Tony. What an original concept that is. And the fears that
they saw it too.
Well, the fears are not interesting fears either. It's like this one dude's afraid of blood. And they don't have like an ocean of blood coming after him. It's just like this one person that he knows that has blood on her face. And he hides from her because he's afraid of blood.
That sounds pretty dumb. Like,
It's
if you've got
real
someone who's
dumb.
afraid of blood, like, the walls should literally be bleeding. Like, there should be blood coming out of candles, whatever the hell you want to do.
They don't, and I can see like in there's certain circumstances where blood is creepy, but they never get you into that mindset. It's just like, here's a person with blood all over their face. He's scared of blood, so he's running away from her now. And essentially like 30 minutes into the movie that all of these things are just illusions that the monster is creating. So it's even worse because and the characters know that none of this stuff is real, except for sometimes when the monster's real, but he teleports around. Anyway. You know that this stuff isn't real, and the people keep running away from it. And it's just irritating, and it's one note basically for the entire movie where they're just running away from the monster, except for the beginning where they just have him in a haunted house because they needed to pad out the movie, so they put him in a haunted house. Like an attraction, a haunted house attraction. Not a real haunted house, like a thing where you run around and people jump out and scare you, and they don't film it in a scary way, so it's just people going in a haunted house. That was not a good movie, but it did have a guy in it in a suit, and he was like a contortionist, and that was pretty cool.
I'm trying to remember the name of a movie that came out a couple of years ago, where it was all about like haunted roadside attractions and things like that.
Oh,
and
no, don't remember it. Let's forget that movie ever existed.
What is it? The documentary?
The house is October built.
Yeah.
Die in a fire, and also the sequel that somehow got made. The houses that October built.
I heard that it was like one of the most incredible movies of that year, so I'm trying to find it here.
It was
what did you not like
incredible
about
that they got it made. It was not credible. It's this. It's the worst type of found footage movie where they are using just like, they're not even using good cameras. Like the people.
Well, they wanted it. Like I saw a thing on that. They wanted it to look older than it was. And then the reason why a sequel got made is because they wanted it to. They wanted to refilm those parts with better cameras.
It was so lazy. Like the acting felt like found footage style acting where you're just like, we'll just act natural. But because you're acting natural in front of a film, it's not how anybody actually acts. And also there's just, I hated it so much. It's the worst of found footage. It's scraping the barrel so bad.
See, like this is from like one of the reviewers that I actually trust, because I don't trust you as a reviewer. So I'll have to go and check it out myself.
What? I thought you were going to read a thing from the reviewer.
No, it's a video. I was just wondering if you had actually seen or heard of it, because we were talking about like found footage and stuff earlier.
It struck me as very lazy. Like the found footage movie thing can be good. All right, it can work. This one did not work for me.
I'm trying to think of the last found footage movie that I actually liked, like that, or like chronologically, because I saw Cannibal Holocaust and there were some redeeming things there. But I'm trying to think of like the last time somebody really nailed it. Like Marble Hornets was pretty good, but it was still very amateurish.
Yeah, Marble Hornets actually, but at least they used their limitations in an interesting way. I will say this, despite the fact that I did not finish it, Never Hike Alone has found footage elements, but it incorporates them into an actual movie. Like there are actual movie shots, and then there's also the fact that this guy is making a documentary about his hike through the woods. He's a YouTuber, right? So he's got this YouTube channel where he's filming himself doing these hikes, and also he has product placement that he does not disclose, apparently. That stuff is interesting, and I like there's nothing wrong with having a POV shot. There's nothing wrong with having an in-universe camera that exists and we cut to from time to time. I would rather see more hybrid films like this.
Yeah, like that was how Leslie Vernon did it.
Yes, Leslie Vernon was excellent. It transitioned out of it really beautifully, and man, I love Leslie Vernon. I heard they were going to make a sequel. They were talking about making a sequel way back in the day, but nothing came of it.
Yeah,
Blumhouse didn't get a contract with them to do 3 films.
I think they'll end up with a sequel somewhere with that. It's just too compelling of an idea. I just don't know how the first one actually did. Like, I can't imagine it was too expensive to make, though.
Speaking of Blumhouse and films that weren't expensive to make, me and Brentley went and saw Happy Deathday, and I was pleasantly surprised by that film. Recommended.
Whenever I saw the trailers for it, I haven't seen it yet, I thought, like, this actually looks like it's well constructed. Because there were a lot of horror movies coming out that just looked bad. Like the new, whatever the social media one was. I can't even remember what it was called. It was like Unfriend Me. And it's like, we've made that movie 3 times. It's a dead idea. Stop.
They had one already, like the one where everybody was on face chat on like Facebook, right? Like all of the people, like the whole movie was just face cam of people getting freaked out. And apparently that was called Unfriended. And now they have another movie that's based on Facebook. A horror film based on Facebook. And somehow they didn't call it Unfriended 2? How do you not call that movie Unfriended 2? I forget what the title actually was. I saw the trailer and
I'm looking it up right now.
Makes me so enraged that they just didn't make Unfriended 2. They did that with Saw 2. So Brantley is fond of bringing this fact up to me that the Saw 2 script was originally just like some other thing, and somebody read this and like, this seems a lot like that Saw movie. Let's change some names and call it Saw 2.
Yeah, you'd think it would have done better that way. I don't know. The first one didn't exactly.
I guarantee you it made back its budget.
That's crazy. Zombies is in theaters near me.
Oh, you are so lucky. You have Cinemark theaters near you?
Yep, we got Cinemark.
They don't have. So the Asylum has a thing they're doing right now with Cinemark where they're playing like a select movie every weekend in theaters in Cinemarks. And you can go, and some of the really fun ones have been in there. They had Two-Headed Shark Attack. I think they had one of the Mega Shark movies, and I'm not anywhere near it, so I can't go. Can't give them money.
I think this new one is called Friend Request.
Is that even legal? Are you allowed to just take a thing that Facebook has and be like, we're going to call our movie after that?
Apparently.
I guess. But whatever. I guess that's all we have to say about Vampire's Kiss. Do we have anything else we want to wrap up with, Tony? I feel like we're coming to the end of our time here.
Yeah, we got a
We've
meeting
been going for
coming up
about
in just a few
45 minutes, and we had technical difficulties ahead of time.
Yeah, you vamped for a half hour and started putting on makeup.
Yeah, that probably isn't going to go in the VOD that goes on YouTube. Maybe we'll put it at the end or something.
Yeah, just be like the unedited director's cut. I'm not sure what we're doing for next week as far as the movie goes, so I can't really comment on that, or who's going to be on it. And I know we kind of want to get Hannah on one of these, but I think she's going to be moving this coming week, so we'll see what happens there. And yeah, thank you all for watching. We got a bunch of October content coming up, so be sure to be around.
Who's up next week? We have another one next week, right? Me and...
Yeah.
Is it me and Hannah? Or is it you and Hannah? I forget what even the movie is. It's Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. I'll be on for Hot Fuzz. I'll definitely do Hot Fuzz. I want Hannah to watch Hot Fuzz because I feel like she'd be like just either blown away by it or disturbed by it. I'm not sure which.
I think it's going to be Tony and Hannah. I might volunteer to be on, but I might not. Maybe I'll have I don't know if I have other things to do that day. And maybe a 3-person. We talked about having Joe on for this one, but he was not. We've discussed having a 3-person Viewers Choice Month thing. Yeah.
Well, Al said. Yeah, well, Al knew. I said I didn't know.
I feel like it must be Hot Fuzz. But anyway, we are going to continue on. There will be more next week. I think that delay is really kicking me now. You know what, Tony? I wish I had FTL on. Boy, wouldn't that be great if we were up to date with the chat? Imagine. I don't know who decided that I shouldn't have FTL. It's Hannah's fault. I think.
Hannah definitely dropped the ball there.
It was
Hannah,
in that same meeting where she told you to throw away your mic arm.
I still don't know who said that. Pretty sure it was Joe.
I feel like Hot Fuzz sometimes too, Rich. Anyway, that'll do it for this week. Thank you guys for watching and enduring with us through the technical difficulties. Barring other technical difficulties, this VOD will be up on YouTube for people to watch a little bit later in the week. And we'll catch you then. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.